And I am Steve Lee, and I'm an alcoholic. I think I'm going to lead us off this evening, and I'm going to get back on gallery view for me here because this is very disconcerting, just looking at me. There. Well, I can't tell you how uncomfortable that was. I've spent most of the day in front of a mirror, and then to do it again here tonight on video would have been really uncomfortable. But almost as uncomfortable as that Ellen C is right in the middle of my screen. Ellen, I want you to know I'm looking to you for encouragement and supportive, a supportive look on your face tonight. But listen, I think this is week 7 that we're here. So how cool is that we're all hanging out, and many of you have been here for every session. And as Teresa said, we're kind of at step 5 tonight, right? We've been on quite a journey together, and we navigated through a description of the problem and a description of the solution and a decision to seek that solution. And then we got down to causes and conditions and self-examination in these various areas of our life, and looking for the manifestations of self as they showed up. And we swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about ourselves. And then it's, as we kind of start every week, it's like, now what, right? And numerically speaking, we're at the 5th step. But the process we've been undergoing, I find it interesting that the book says that we've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. That's what we've been doing. That's what we've been doing in the inventory. And really, that's what we've been doing from the very beginning, is we stopped drinking, or we move the bottle off to the side and engage in this these 12 spiritual principles as a design for living, in an effort to find the obstacles that are standing between me and God and me and you. And so that's what the real effort is. And the sobriety becomes a byproduct of that. But I'm really glad, quite often doing at one of the Woodstock events, or when you're given like an hour to speak on steps 4 and 5 somewhere, I always end up being guilty of doing 55 minutes on the 4th step and then mention that the 5th step is a really good thing and I encourage it, and not having given it any time, and it deserves this type of time and attention. It deserves it in our execution, and embracing that is something. It is not like one of the drive-by steps. It's in the top 12. It's a critical step. And so I need to make sure that tonight we really get to do a deeper dive on it. So we're going to be able to look at, I think, from a few different angles. I mean, obviously, having just done the inventory, I want to come at it and talk about me sharing my 4th step, doing a 5th step with my sponsor. But it's also, I think that before we're done tonight, we want to talk a little bit about the other side of that coin as well, about being the person that hears that 5th step, because there may be no greater privilege that I'm given than when someone is willing to share with me about themselves in a way that perhaps they never have. And I think many of us on here have had that experience where someone says to you, I'm going to tell you that something I've never told anyone before. Boy, what a privilege that is, and how sacred I want to treat that. And I want to be a safe place to share that information as a sponsor, or even just a trusted friend in AA. So we'll look at all of that. We land here and it says, if we've been thorough, and Ralph touched on this toward the end of last week, and I want to start the first of this week with it. It says, if we've been thorough about our inventory, we've written down a lot. We've listed and analyzed our resentments. We've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. And we've listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. That being so, you swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. The point I want to make about that is that happens for us at the fourth step. That I arrived for my fifth step in that state. It suggests here that I arrived there having become acquainted with the futility and fatality of life as I've been living. I arrived there having begun to learn patience and tolerance and viewing my enemies as sick people. I arrived there with this new attitude. And the first thing I want to say lest I forget to do it later, is as a person who hears a fifth step, I've adjusted my role a little bit over the years. It will not be hard for anyone that's been with us the last 6 weeks to believe when I tell you that there were times that you came to do your fifth step with me and I talked more than you did. You know what I mean? I began commenting right away. I began having suggestions and information and insights, and it is immaterial whether they were accurate or inaccurate. What I want to say today is I want to honor that man or woman that shows up with that information, that has taken that honest and thorough look, that has done a deep dive and shows up with this work, shows up with the having put pen to paper. And I want to, and I think my number one role is to listen. I think my number one role is to say, share with me what you did. And we may, toward the back end of that, or I may take a note here and there, but ultimately I want to honor that process by hearing what you have put down on that fourth step, because what it says is that we share with another person, right? And then the 12 and 12 lets us know that the sponsor might kind of come back in with some of his or her own experience, might try to find that commonality. But I am much less a participant in your fifth step than I used to be. And by the way, I think that's my role. So anyway, there's that. When we show up with that fourth step that we've done the work with, you know, what's next, right? Why would I subject myself to what I now view as humbling, but used to view as humiliating process of sharing this information with somebody? And the best reason first, our book says, I might not get over drinking if I don't. So that's a pretty big, incentive that if I want to get over drinking, then I probably need to do that. I was sitting in a meeting. I may have even mentioned this over the last couple of weeks, but I was sitting in a meeting a few years ago, and it was on the fifth step, and there was a newer man in there who was working on his fourth step. And he said in the meeting, and he said it earnestly and honestly and not to be argumentative, but he said, I don't know why this is necessary. He said, I know more about me than anybody. Why do I need to share this with somebody else? And the thought that came to me as he was talking was, I know more about me than anybody, but I often misunderstand the information. I often don't know what to do with what I found when it's done. I often turn this into some sort of thing to flog myself with. And when done best, I believe the fourth step and the fifth step is kind of dispassionate. I try to remove my emotion from it and just kind of like Joe Friday on the old Dragnet show, just the facts, man. And just deal with what I find and navigate through it. Uh, and it says, who should hear this fifth step? I mean, and I understand if there's some people on here who are newer and you haven't gotten to that point yet, that's a worthwhile thing to consider. Who am I going to trust with this? Now, in AA, the vast majority of us share our fifth steps with our sponsor. And if I'm your sponsor, I hope you will share your fifth step with me, because if you can't, then perhaps I haven't engendered the type of faith that I hope I can bring to that relationship. But I don't get to rewrite the rules. And Alcoholics Anonymous says that it says a few things. It says that I want to find an understanding person. Now, obviously, when the book was written, there wasn't a sponsor on every corner. This book was distributed far and wide to where there were maybe little pockets, and so people were kind of navigating on their own and trying to find that person that they might share this with. And obviously, often that was someone from the clergy, or as it says, a trusted friend. But it says we want them to understand what we're doing here, what our mission is. So I think it's not an unimportant thing. And I appreciate giving thoughtful consideration to who is to hear this fifth step. But I also suggest if it is not your sponsor, you might want to evaluate that relationship a little bit as well. I don't mean that in a bad way. And I've had a couple of people that wanted to share a portion of their fifth step or of their fourth step and go share the fifth step, a part of it with a clergy or a therapist. And I will tell you, I did not discourage that because I think that once they had that conversation, it made it easier for them to come back around to me ultimately and maybe when we get used to saying this stuff out loud, sometimes it begins to take some of the power away from it, which is why that's been so critical. So who I picked to do this fifth step, we're given some direction. And how do I arrive? How do I want to show up for that fifth step? And it says we pocket our pride. We illuminate, shine a light on every nook and cranny. And it says we must tell someone our whole life story if we are to live, if we expect to live long or happily. That's all that's at stake, living long and happily. If you want to live briefly and unhappily, so be it. But if I want to live long and happily, this has been a critical component of, and it begins, and I'm going to go into more detail over the hour. I'm about to hand it off to Ralph to put this thing back in the middle of the road. But I think it is so important. I was confused. I can still be, and confused is maybe not the right word. I can misinterpret what the benefit of this fifth step is going to be for me. It felt like an obligatory kind of punitive, I've got to come tell somebody to confess my sins, if you will. I've got to come tell you what a bad person I am and what bad things I have done. And what I have found is actually this is where our book says we begin to enter the world of the spirit. It's where that sense of isolation begins to disappear. This is where when I am willing and to take the risk, pride and ego will show up and tell me, Steve, you can't tell them that. We talked about that a little bit, I think, over the last couple of weeks. Steve, you must keep that a secret. And what has been my experience is because my fear is if you know that, if you become aware of that, you're going to think less of me. You're going to reject me. You might even tell somebody else what I told you. This could go wrong 100 different ways. But in truth, my experience over 31 years has been, because I confess at the drop of a hat today. I tell people more than they want to know about me. But when I share myself honestly and openly with you, my experience has been it draws us closer together rather than what separates us. Those very things that my pride, that my ego, that self-centered fear tells me is going to get between you and me, is exactly what's blocking me from you. It's exactly what's in the way of that relationship with God and that relationship with you. So when I've been willing to put it out there, and have there been occasions where someone has shared a piece of information about me I would rather they hadn't? There has. It was well worth the risk. Well worth. I have been more than compensated for my concerns, that minute as they have been. So, Ralph, I'm going to hand it over to you, let you talk about some of those things. And then when I get back in the saddle 5 minutes before the hour, then I'm going to share a little bit about my actual inventory, fifth step experience, both sharing it and hearing a couple and some of the things that I ran into there. Thanks so much. Take it away, Ralph.
My name is Ralph White. I'm an alcoholic. And thank you, Steve. And the fifth step often gets short shrift in terms of attention that's paid to it. Often, we combine 4 and 5. So this is a good experience to get a chance to talk about 5 standing by itself, because 5, the fifth step, admitted to God, ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. It's there's a lot of meat on that bone. When we finished up last week, and Steve just talked about it, it said at the end of the 4th step, we've swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about ourselves. And I don't quibble with the book, but then when I read it like the way it shows up in my life. And I don't think I swallow and digest until I get to the 5th step. I've written some stuff and I've looked at some stuff, but I don't think I really swallow and digested these big chunks of truth. And for a lot of people, a lot of the times, I found that people gag on it, end up stopping, wonder why it is. The book says we only thought we only thought we had cleaned house, and we held on to some of the worst items in stock because I gagged. I didn't swallow and digest. I spit it back up. It's unpalatable to me. No, I can't look at this. No, I hear what you're saying, but it's still, this cannot be me. And I think that the best way that I can swallow and digest is not in, book talks about a solitary self-appraisal. See, that's the problem with a solitary self-appraisal. I don't swallow and digest. Solitary self-appraisal, I tell myself it is what it ain't. And I tell myself it ain't what it is, and because for me, well, what about just me and God? Why do we have to have this trio, God, ourselves, and to another human being? Why can't it just be me and God? Because I have never, number one, coming into this 5th step, I'm still in the process of facing and being rid of what's blocking me from this power, right? So I'm still maybe on some uncertain ground about this power anyway. Or on the other hand, I know that there's a power. I know he sees me. I know he knows my thoughts. But check this out. I've never been embarrassed with the thought of God seeing me. I've been embarrassed with the thought of Teresa seeing me. I've been embarrassed at the thought of Ali seeing me. I've been embarrassed at the thought of Ellen listening to me and judging me. Don't know about anybody else sharing about me. I get embarrassed about what you think of me. I am what it described when we talked about the 4th step. The world and its people, not God. The world and its people dominate me. I'm a high achiever. I'm a bookworm. I'm a schoolboy. And the reason I'm a high achiever ain't for achievement in and of itself. It's because I gotta be, I always said, if you treat me special, I feel normal. You treat me normal, I feel rejected. Story of my life. So this business of fourth step and fifth step, it's some interesting things that take place in the fourth and fifth, you guys. And I like to think in a lot of our steps, what I call unintended consequences. So we'll read about this, and the intended consequence is, if I don't do this fifth step, I might not overcome drinking. Big one. It's a big one. I might not. Why do you think that is for you, Ralph? Because I'm a secret keeper. Remember some of the stuff that we say, you guys, when you get in a workshop, we put them to the side because they sound a little trite. And Steve and I, we got to be heavy, right? But there are some trite sayings that hold true. Sick is our secrets. Sick is our secrets. Fifth step, you know. And the interesting thing about going to meetings, that's why I like to talk about how the program all holds together, the steps, the fellowship, the service, all of it. You know, there's a synchronicity. When people start going up to the podium, you guys, there was a guy at my first home group, 9604 South Figueroa. And this guy, a lot of people on here that go to 96 know Dennis L. And he's my boy. He don't mind. And Dennis L was a big guy, tall guy, man's man. And Dennis L would talk at the podium and he'd say something. I was brand new. And he would get to the podium and he'd say some of the most outlandish things. And I'd be like, he didn't say that in front of everybody, did he? Did he? Check this out. I didn't know you guys were prepping me. I didn't know you were getting me ready. I didn't know that the culmination of all the meetings I went to, you know, of all that, these self-revealing accounts that we hope you guys don't see are in bad taste, all that undressing, all that inappropriateness, because who says it? We do. God don't make hard terms of what we do. You know, so sometimes folk be saying other folk are inappropriate. I don't know, because some of the inappropriate is what freed me. Now, and I'm a guy that'll sit up there and just, why are you saying that? How dare he say some stuff like that? But when it got time for me to sit down in front of somebody, so I do a fourth step, you guys, and I'm going to talk about my first foray into a fifth step. So I'm a year and a half sober. And I have been hearing a lot about this 4 and 5, 4 and 5, 4 and 5. If it ain't my experience, you're lying about it being yours. So when I finally put pen to paper, I started believing people do the 12 steps. Third step was something you could see. I got down on my knees with some people. I saw that. I participated in it. I held hands. But it was a relatively simple exercise. Monkey see, monkey do. Everybody get in a circle. Everybody hold hands. Follow. Okay. Somebody led us in the third step prayer and we repeated after them. Really easy. Then we said the fourth step. First tangible evidence that this guy, 34 years old now, was willing to do something different about his life. Tangible evidence. And I started believing that people do more than just talk about these steps. Because I come from a place, and I do it, where you don't have to do something to talk about doing it. You don't have to really have done it. In fact, I like to talk about it and then give me the Cliff Notes version for what people really do. You know, yeah, we talk about these steps in the rooms, but okay, let me go to the side, Steve. Now tell me what the real deal is, because I know somebody around here is sipping every now and then. I know for real somebody is hitting a J every now and then. I know somewhere they not really doing. And when I put pen to paper, I became a believer. Became a believer. And so then I did pen to paper. Could not wait to sit down. Now, that is not me. I'm a secret keeper. I'm an embarrassment guy. That's bigger. When we talked about fear, we think it ought to be classed with stealing. You guys remember that thread of fear inventory that we talked about a couple of weeks ago is a corrosive thread that runs through the rest of whenever we talk about these steps. So when we talk about outgrowing fear, the first place we get the opportunity to put that in practice is a fifth step. I'm scared. I'm scared to sit down in front of my sponsor. Bob Hunt was a guy that, I respected a lot. And he was, in fact, my first fifth step, my sponsor, it's interesting because Steve talked about doing it with your sponsor. My sponsor heard my second fifth step. My first fifth step I did with the guy who was the facilitator of the workshop I was in at the time. I had just started trusting him, and so I sat down with a lot of reluctance, you guys. And when I did my fifth step, this is what I do with a fifth step. I did it then, and this is what I do when I listen. And what qualifies you to listen to a fifth step is having done a fifth step. It's pretty much what qualifies you to listen to a fifth, is having done a fifth step. And so when I did this fifth, I sat down and I read. Now, this guy gave me something that I've carried on ever since. Ralph, I see you kind of flitting up. No, read what you wrote. Because it's tempting for somebody that's sitting on here who hasn't done one before. It's tempting to now, when I sit in front of who I'm sitting in front of, to now start editing and censoring my writing. Read what you wrote. Gary told me, Ralph, read what you wrote. He could see me stumbling and no, dude, read what you wrote. There's a reason for that. It's there. And I started reading what I wrote. Now, some people are going to say, Ralph, how should you read your resentment inventory? Should you go all the way across? Should you go down? Should you do? I don't know. That's between you and whoever it is that you read it with. I've done all manner of stuff. And like Steve, as a sponsor listening to a fifth step, I changed a lot. I used to have some rules. I used to say, don't come to me if you have you on your resentment inventory. I don't want to hear it. Don't come to me if you have something I don't want to hear. Now I don't have those rules. If you wrote it, I'll listen to it. I also don't listen to some things I used to listen to. Wow. I used to listen when somebody had me on their inventory because I'm a big boy. I can take it. I can man up. I can handle it. That dishonesty is rooted in, how do I know I can handle it before you read it to me? How do I know? But I'm a big boy and I can handle it. More fundamentally, that's unfair to you. That's unfair to you. In the reading, when we talked about this, we said those parts, that'll be that will affect me or my family. We read to somebody who will be unaffected. I don't know if you really care about me. I don't know if you can honestly say to me what it is you need to say to me. If you really are just trying to get a free shot at me, then that's a whole undermining the purpose of what this is for. You know what I'm saying? And I've had them both. I've had people, okay, this is a free shot. Let me go in here and read it. No, read it to somebody who will be unaffected. If you sat up here and you probably, if you got somebody that's really close, if you got a mate or a spouse and your sponsee wants to come and talk, you might want to have them. Again, that's on you. That's on you. But those are the kinds of things in a fifth step that we look at. And I never look at it from my perspective. I look at it from the other person's perspective or the third party perspective. We don't have the right to save our own skin at somebody else's expense. We'll say that here in the fifth step. We'll say that in the eighth when we get to the ninth step also. So when I started listening and doing and sharing, I didn't realize, you guys, that you had prepared me for a fifth step. Me being green, if I had been coming into the program and if I tried to do a fifth step, I'm not saying this for everybody. I'm saying it for me. If I had tried to do a fifth step and hadn't gone to meetings before, I'm in here about 30 days or 60 days, I guarantee you it would not have been the kind of fifth step I took as a result of sitting, because this is where God works with my defects. This is where our program is so built for me. I tell you guys, I'm built for you. Program is tailor-made for me because it worked on me and it primed me and it prepped me. I sat in enough meetings and I saw enough people undress, and that's not the big deal about it. For me, for a guy like me, I saw people undress. and I saw him be supported. I saw him be supported. And I saw people undress, and I monitored my reaction to them when they did it. And my reaction to them wasn't, look at them. My reaction to them was admiration and respect. It was big for a guy like me. It was huge. You mean you could undress? You mean I had a friend when I was new, and she said, Ralph, when you think you're looking bad, that's when you're looking good in AA. And I saw people get up to the podium, can't read, stumble, stagger, excruciating, takes them 15 minutes to read how it works. And everybody is sitting on the edge of their seat. And me, I'm like, why did they pick them to read? And then at the end of that excruciating exercise, all you guys clap real loud. You clap real loud. And you make me proud to be in your number, because you make me better than I am. And I didn't know that I was doing something. It was prepping me. It was prepping me for the stuff that's the biggest thing in me, this embarrassing, exercise of a fifth step. So I sit, and I don't know that I've been primed for till I look back. Right now, in fact, it's not until I'm in this conversation with you guys right now that I realized that preparation that took place, And so then I started doing fifths, you guys. And one of our core principles, we have some core principles, one of surrender, one drug sharing with another. That's core. That's fundamental to who we are. There are some other ones that I call core that I've discovered from listening to you guys. I think one of our core principles is that principle of kindness to strangers. That's core to what we do. The principle of the invitation, third step. I invite, got seventh step, the invitation, core. And that other core principle is this idea of the basis of sponsorship. You'll see it in the fifth step too. And I say it, I have some sponsees on here now, and I have some people I get to work with. And I always say, you know what makes a good sponsee? What makes a good sponsor? A willing sponsee. The principle of voluntarily letting somebody in, choosing to trust. Some people say trust is earned, but for us, choosing to trust. Your sponsor hasn't earned it before you trust him. When a sponsee sits with me the first time, they have not gone down this road with me before. When I sat with Gary Post that first time, I chose to trust him. I chose to invest him with me. I chose to. And the biggest reason for that kind of choosing was, of course, my background. What drove me into these rooms, self-imposed crisis I could neither evade nor ignore. But you guys had done some stuff to me that put me in position, to where I was willing to take a chance. And so when we get this deal of sponsorship, you guys, everybody on here, all of us come from grown ass men. Can't tell me that all of us have that. Mavericks, malcontents, misfits. Don't nobody. What is it that happens then that we voluntarily turn ourselves over to somebody? I voluntarily turned myself over to do. And I read my 3 inventories. I read resentment inventory, and I read everything I wrote. I didn't edit. I didn't do anything. And he did what I do. He did a mini fifth with me because he saw I was nervous and I was afraid. And I thought that what I was saying was brand new news. He did a mini fifth. I do a mini fifth. I've done what Steve did too over the years. I used to overshare. I used to and I would try myself doing that. Now, because the book talks about we could do it with clergy. We don't even have to do it. That suggests to me that the basis of the fifth step, sometimes we overthink it because we get caught up in analysis. We get caught up in being heavy. We get caught up in trying to impress our sponsees or the person sharing with us with how insightful we are. The basis of the fifth step is the self-revelation. That's the basis of it. You don't even really have to get input. We have found over the years that it is extremely beneficial to the swallow and digest process that somebody can be a mirror for me. We found that to be beneficial, but it's not in and of itself the main thing. I can make it the main thing. My insight, I can make that ain't the main thing. The main thing is you get a guy like Rob, 34 years old, that's a secret keeper. That's a guy that's ashamed of what he think you're going to think about him. You get a guy like him to open up to you. And then he starts practicing that muscle. He starts practicing that honesty muscle, that sharing muscle, that transparent muscle. He gets to practice in it. That's why I've done many fifth steps over the years. And pretty soon it gets to be so part of you that you find yourself saying, you'll scare regular people because you'll sit in the airport, somebody will say, how you doing? You'll tell them, ooh, what? Don't even realize because we get so accustomed to it. Fifth step, unintended consequence. It's another one of the places. So I do the sharing. And then in addition to all of the inventories that I've written, there's another piece that takes place in the fifth step. And it's the place where it says we share every dark cranny, every nook and cranny until we share our whole life story. Where does that fit? So that means there are some things that are not under the head category of resentment, fear, and sex conduct. They fall in this other category. We call that, or I call it the take it to the grave list. I'm not telling nobody this ever. No way, no how, nothing. And a wise sponsor or an experienced person who's listening to a fifth step always knows. Let's go there. Well, what about, okay, is there anything else? Sometimes you'll get a call when a person's leaving you 30 minutes later and you might be waiting. I was expecting that, Ali. Holler at me. To take it to the grave list. And so then I walk up out of there, because I am what's described. I'm really the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I'm guilty. I'm Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I'm Dr. Jekyll. I'm double life guy in the life for real. I'm less double life guy, but I'm still double life guy in recovery. I put this face on that I want the world to see. Talk about enjoying a reputation, that he really feels he doesn't deserve. And that's over time, you guys. Let that, don't think that everything that's going to happen is going to happen in one sitting. Don't think everything that's going to happen is going to happen in one fifth step. Don't think everything that's going to happen, well, damn, I've done a fifth step on this. How come I still, well, because this ain't a 5-step program. And this uncover, discover, and discard, 4 and 5 is really uncover, discover, and there is the beginning of the discarding. But we got 6, 7, 8, and 9 for the heavy lifting on the discarding. The discarding starts in the fifth step, me telling some stuff. But it's more taking the trash out and emptying it, 6, 7, 8, 9. You know what I'm saying? So that's why don't get discouraged at that. I'm gonna get ready to kick it back to Steve, and I wonder, Steve, if you ever had an experience. I'm gonna share an experience I had, and I wonder if you did. I have had the experience, you guys, of doing a 4th step and not doing a 5th. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. And the reason why I did it was the kind of stuff that was trip up a guy like me. It was cosmetic. I didn't like the way I did the lines on my 4th step. I didn't give myself enough room And so some people will understand this. If you've never done a fourth, you probably won't. Or if you've never done a fourth the way I do, you probably won't. I done too many names on one page, and the second column was cool. When it got to the third column, I ran out of room. I needed to go to some other pages, and the fourth. So now I had these pages all over the place. I got pissed off because I'm this guy, right? I want to, that's important to me to have my stuff lined up right and on. But what I learned was that's another form of ego, and it comes up in two places, pride to tell you, fear will tell you can't look. And that's what was happening that time. I don't want to, and pride to tell you, plus you ain't got to. You went this far without looking. You went this far without talking. And just because of something as simple as not having my inventory cosmetically in order, I put off doing a fifth. That's crazy, you guys. I had done a lot of work. I used to say a little, doing a fourth and not doing a fifth is like having sex and not coming. Why are you going to do all that work and not get the benefit? That's crazy. So you guys, please, see, I get, put me back in order, Steve. Take it. Save me from me.
Ralph, I think I speak for all of us when we enjoyed the climactic ending to that story. But that was, and I have to tell you guys that I'm so thrilled that that Ralph no longer allows his sponsees to share their resentments against him in that fifth step, because I ask them all to call me and share those resentments about Ralph, and it's a constant source of entertainment for me. So I'm grateful for that. You asked Ralph if I had done an inventory and then chosen not to share it for whatever reason, and I have, and I think I've done it more than once. I think I maybe mentioned sometime over the last 2 or 3 weeks that in 1997, at 8 years sober, I did an inventory around finances because things were tougher. And I did this, and I was fearless and thorough in my inventory. But I did not share it with my sponsor because as I looked at the inventory, it was clear to me that he was going to suggest some modifications in my behavior that I was not yet willing to adhere to. So after the bankruptcy, 2 years later, I began to try to get out ahead of these things a little more and share my inventory in real time, because it really is a pay me now or pay me later type of game. And not in a punishing or punitive way. I just get to live with the consequences of my choices and decisions. God's not punishing me. I am in a self-imposed crisis. And so anyway, and you also talked about being a secret guy, Ralph, and certainly I kept secrets. I kept secrets about things I had done, but I kept secrets about the way that I felt as well. I kept secrets about prejudices of varying degrees. In other words, I didn't give voice to them, but I was plagued by them. I didn't give voice to fears that I had because I was plagued by them. I didn't lie about them as much as I kept them internal. And this chance to finally let you know who I am, and that began with a sponsor. I used to say, when I was 15 years sober, I kept what I used to call a little secret for 3.5 years. And it dawned on me, if I can't tell it, it must not be little, right? Maybe it should be, but it has become more. It is too big for me. I don't feel like I can live with the consequences of this truth. And the sponsor that I have today, Don M., my sponsor, Frank, had passed away in 2008, and I went about a year without a sponsor, which made it easier not to tell on myself. And then I was on a lunch. We were at an AA conference and broke for took the lunch break, and I went on a walk with Don Major, who some of you know, and Don and I are on this walk, and I said, man, I need to tell you something. I've been holding a secret. I said, so I'm going to make you my sponsor, so you're held to that confidentiality clause. And he said, okay. And I've been telling him my secrets ever since. But the truth is, I don't have secrets. I've been telling them the truth about me. And I've been telling other people the truth about me. And it is, when it says the truth will set you free, I think what that means is that's the bondage of self. And again, it feels like that me keeping the secret is protecting me, when in fact it is just the opposite, just the opposite. When I went to do my very first inventory or my first fifth step, I will tell you, it was the most disappointing day of my recovery. It wasn't disappointing because of it was disappointing because all I showed up to do was talk about the first two columns, which is all I'd done in my inventory, frankly. So I wanted to tell you about them and tell you what they did. My sponsor, I was having trouble getting started with my inventory. And he said, Steve, why don't you start with the acute and the obvious? And I decided my mother was acute and my brother was obvious. And I wrote about them. And then I went and told him what I wrote about them, which was just their names and what they did to me. And I said that my brother was dominating and my mother was intimidating. And he stopped me and he said, is it possible that you're intimidated and you're dominated? Can you turn that around? And it doesn't mean that their behavior isn't what it is, but maybe you want to look at why you're intimidated. Why do you feel dominated in that? And that's about as far as, and I nodded like I agreed with him. And we continued with the conversation, but internally I was absolutely distraught because here was yet another guy who didn't understand sufficiently the problem I put before him. And he suggested a few things that I do, as we sometimes do coming out of that fifth step. He made a few suggestions, and I nodded like I was going to do them because I was afraid to challenge Frank. He was a big man physically and personality-wise. And so I got in my car driving home terribly disappointed. I was miserable for about 3 days. Finally, I made the decision to do what he suggested I do. Now, here's what I will tell you. When I tell you I made the decision to do what he suggested I do, that really was a third step decision. I had immediate relief from that decision. And I did what he suggested, even though it had no relationship to my problem. And for years after that, I would tell Frank that I don't think you're very smart, and I don't think you give very good advice, but my life seems to get remarkably better when I follow it. And I think that what I mean by that, and I'm really not discounting the suggestions and advice, but what I mean by that is I believe my willingness to surrender my life, and in this case, default to the judgment of a sponsor as I begin to try to establish a relationship with God where my true dependence will ultimately be, that I got relief by that willingness to take that action. The other thing I want to say as we race toward the end of the hour is the first time I heard a fifth step. You cannot imagine the pressure I put on myself, or maybe you can. Did you ever go, as you got them coming over, or you're going to meet somebody to hear that first fifth step, and I'm thinking, I got to say something life-changing to this guy. I got to have some answers, even if I have to make them up. And but I got to bring some material to this thing. And and that is what Ralph said earlier, what I talked about, oversharing, listening to a fifth step, and Ralph had said that there are times he had done that earlier. That is when my ego is involved in the process. And I don't even mean an ego that says I got all the answers. It's an ego that says I've got to have an answer. Not feeling confident about the answer at all. Not knowing I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but it's my responsibility to show up with something. And boy, life gets easier when I put that mantle down, when I take my personality out. When we talk about later in practicing, principles before personalities. I mean, that it doesn't mean I don't have a personality. It just means the principle should be out in front. The principle is the lead float. So when I am hearing that fifth step, I don't want to inject my personality into that process. I want to show up as a mirror to the principles that Alcoholics Anonymous is talking about, and try to provide that guidance. And it is almost, and I will tell you, what my experience has been is I have been much more honest with a sponsee than I have a sponsor. That when that sponsee's in front of me, I have said things I did not know I had not said. I didn't know I'd kept it a secret. I didn't know it had not shown up. But see, when that man or woman is in front of us and taking that risk, all we can do is give that back. All we can do is give as good as we're getting. And I have ended up sharing things in a way that again, not that I was knowingly keeping secret, that honesty of a sponsee has pulled the truth out of me in a way that sometimes I didn't know. And so don't, whichever side of that equation, there's years ago, a man out of Rhode Island, some people on here might have known a guy named Jack Gallagher. Jack's passed away, but Jack gave away these little keychains to everybody. And Jack gave me a keychain, and on it was it had two hands clasping. And many of you have seen this in other places, but it had two hands clasping. And it said, everybody needs help. And below it, it said, everybody can help. And what I would tell you is when we're engaged in that fifth step process, whether I am the person sharing the fifth step or whether I'm the person hearing the fifth step, I promise you both sides of that equation are both needing help and getting help. So none of us want to cheat ourselves from that opportunity. And so that's kind of the experience that I've had. That the book says that I will leave, and you already heard me say this wasn't my experience in my first fifth step, which speaks to my fifth step. But the book says if we've taken this step, and it does give a caveat, withholding nothing. If I've taken this step withholding nothing, I'm delighted. I mean, that's kind of I'm delighted. That's sort of just a cute little throwaway, it feels like, that I can look the world in the eye. How cool is that? And the reason I can look the world in the eye is we're on even footing now. I'm holding nothing back. When I kept that secret that I told you about for 3.5 years, I'll tell you what my experience was. My experience is that I began to sit in AA meetings and a certain topic would come up and I'd either have to decide that I can't share or I'll have to share and be full of BS. Now, you guys know which one of those I chose, but they are equally uncomfortable. What I realized is over that time, I was becoming more and more blocked off from you and from God. That this shows up in a way, in a strange way, it began to isolate me again. It began to separate me because that secret, it is not the information that I'm protecting that makes the difference. It's the secret that makes the difference. That secret will disconnect me from you and from God because I'm flying solo. That secret, by the way, if you have the secret and if I have the secret, it is my belief that that secret has now become my higher power. That secret is the highest power in my life because I've elevated it above my relationship with God. I haven't consciously done that. That's just the effect that it has on me. And so now I just want to get rid of those things that we started this whole inventory process off with, that said we want to face and be rid of those things in ourselves which are blocking us. And where we started in the fifth step that says that we're trying to build upon this relationship with a higher power, that's where we're headed. And so I encourage you and me. I'll end by saying what Ralph, I've had a lot of guys, if you folks have sponsored people, you've had the experience. I've had the experience as the person doing the fifth step where we walk away and we did not share it all. We kept that take it to the grave secret. Invariably, when somebody has called me back later and said, Steve, there's something I left out. Not always, but 90% of the time it's of a sexual nature. And we talked about that last week. And the reason is because that feels so personal, so private, so embarrassing. We attach shame to that, and we will protect ourselves in that area maybe more than any other. It might be something we did. It might be something that was done to us. But those things will come in and will say, Steve, that's the one you got to keep. So I remember I went and told that first inventory, I kept one of those secrets. And about 6 months later, I was with a guy, we were riding to a meeting, and I told the guy that I'm going to the meeting with, I shared the secret with him. I just didn't tell him it was a secret. I just talked about it like it was in conversation. And he didn't know what a special day it was for him that I'd laid this on his doorstep, but it was so freeing for me. I just kind of dropped it, and let's see, I'll try with him and see how this goes. And it went really well. It went really well, and that's the kind of thing that's happened. And anyway, I've just loved being able to have this conversation with you guys tonight, and thank you so much for giving Ralph and I your attention. Ralph, why don't you wrap it up for a couple of minutes?
Oh, no, let's take questions now. Thank you.
Kind of that you've kind of backed off in a sense when you're listening to a fifth step. When do you guys push someone to get out of the secret? Because I've done fourth and fifths with a guy, and to me, there's there's an elephant in the room and it's not being talked about, and you can see he's uncomfortable. And I'm afraid that, that's the thing that'll take him out later. And I recently worked with someone where I think some things didn't get addressed. And I've kind of done the same thing. I don't push as hard as I used to. And, sometimes I wonder, am I failing in my responsibility? Whatever you got there for me. Thank you, guys.
So in that situation, I never push because just because I think I'm failing doesn't mean I'm failing. That's the God suit. That's the God suit. We don't work with others to get them sober. We work with others to get them. And that's when I talk about the principle of voluntary. Sponsees and when Steve was talking, he reminded me, I have sponsees. I don't want to say they put me to shame, but sometimes when I listen to them, I'm like, wow, who's sponsoring who? I mean, the level of honesty. And so then you get somebody that's not there. What I cannot do is pull that out of them. Their experience does. So the only thing I do then, Mark, is that's when I do my fifth step. That is when I do my fifth step, and so that is always the principle in Alcoholics Anonymous. We share our stories, and then they match inconsistency with inconsistency, story with story. If they don't, when you hear a story like Steve, it reminds me, Steve's guy couldn't have got it out of him, but 6 months later, the experience of carrying it is what did it. I would like to think as a sponsor, I pulled it out of him. No, my sponsor, Bob B, always says, the doctor doesn't heal. He sets an environment for which healing can take place. Farmer doesn't grow. He sets he sets an environment for which grow, so sponsors, we don't heal. We don't pull it out. We just set the environment. And, for me, in a case like you just said, the best thing I do in a situation like that is when I do a mini fifth, when I undress. And I've undressed more in front of sponsees than I have in front of my sponsor. I'm with Steve on that.
Yeah. I mean, Mark, he hit it. I think number one, there's no, obviously for none of us, is there a hard and fast rule, and our job is to try to be helpful. And sometimes I try to trust that intuitive voice, and again, get my personality out of the way and see what feels right. I would encourage rather than coerce. They sometimes it's fine line, but I want to be encouraging, but I want to be a safe place. And if that person begins to think every time they raise something up that I'm going to put them in a corner and press them, then I think that I'm more liable to shut them down than open them up. But we do always, I think, on the front end, let people know the risk involved in not putting everything on the table.
Thank you, Mark, for your question. Tom K., come on up, please.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you for this meeting, and thank you so much, Steve and Ralph. I really enjoy these meetings. You just bring a lot of wisdom to our groups here. But the question I have is, have either of you heard a fifth step where the person that was, what you were hearing was so disgusting that you were not able to respond to it, where it became just comes to the point where it's absolutely just disgusting. That's the best word I can think of. And how do you respond if, I shouldn't say if you get in that situation, but the question is have either of you ever been in that situation?
Well, first time I want to say that having you and Mark here, that Oxnard is in the house and with questions. And so we're grateful for that. It's there's a couple of things that come to mind, but what the short answer would be, I think I want to go into that. Disgusting is not the word I would use. I can hear disgusting. And besides, that's pretty subjective term depending on who's listening. But if I find a person who I believe is trying to be titillating for the sake of being titillating, if they have veered off course, I am encouraged to try to maybe, herd that in a little bit. But in general, there's another question that'll probably come up. There's also things I've heard in a fifth step I wish I hadn't heard because I didn't know what to do with the information. And by that I mean something that might be threatening to someone else or reveal something that is hard to navigate. But I can hear something disgusting. In fact, I've shared something disgusting, so I think it works okay.
Yeah, disgusting is not that's I do disgusting. I probably could mirror disgusting right back, so that one isn't the one. But I have had something that was disquieting before. I have listened in a fifth step where somebody had been actively involved in some behavior with kids. And so there's a sanctity, I think, of the fifth step. And then there is also some personal responsibility. And that's one of the few situations where I and the sponsee invited some outside help in. And it's one of the few times I did something in the form of an ultimatum in all the years I've been sponsoring. But it's one of the few times that I've ever done that. And again, that's, that one is specific and personal, and that's probably as far as I'll go with that one in this form.
Thank you, Tom, for your question. Mickey's unable to raise his hand electronically, but come on up, brother. He messaged me.
Thanks, Ellie. And Ralph and Steve, thank you again for everything that you're sharing. It's hitting this alcoholic very hard. And Steve, you touched upon something when you talked about the secret you held for many, many years and avoiding and or not telling the truth if it came up in a meeting or a topic of discussion. My question is a current situation for me. I'm going to share openly. I've been going through, stuff, and it's to do with sex conduct, with relationships, and I'm trying to be as open and honest, but there's something inside of me right now that I just can't put into words how it's affecting me, and I don't know if the secret is the word for it, but I just can't describe it in human words to be able to share it with my sponsor or someone else in the program or put it on paper. I've written many, many inventories, but I can't explain it. I don't know if you have any experience with that. Is it, I'm not going to pretend to know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to share, hopefully that you can share some experience there.
Well, I wouldn't pretend to fully grasp all of what you're wrestling with, Mickey, but I would say that if you have gotten as far as putting something on paper that even if you feel doesn't adequately express what you're feeling, I would use that. I would still share that or encourage sharing that with my sponsor or someone, because I find when I begin to have that conversation that sometimes the words begin to show up, that I can't have that conversation in my head. That can't be the conversation with myself just seems to go in circles. So, and I think that being stuck inside there, that feeling is kind of, for me anyway, that sense of isolation. And I need to start trying to put words to it, even if I don't feel like I've got the words, the adequate vocabulary to express it. I believe that'll show up. I believe God, you provide the willingness, God will provide the wherewithal.
And based on the fact of your total willingness to even share it to this extent tonight, Mick, I'm really going to, without knowing particulars, and I don't like talking about stuff for which I don't have a lot of information, but without talking about particulars, I'm really going to invite, and I know you'll be here anyway, but I think that when we get to next week, you might land in what we're going to be talking about next week. It sounds like we might be talking about a 6 and 7. Just guessing.
Thank you, Mickey. Doug, come on up, please.
Yeah, Doug Rattle, alcoholic. First, Steve, I want to thank you for listening to me when I have resentments against Ralph, because he won't hear that crap. No, but when I was about 4 years sober, I heard a fifth step of a guy who was molested by his aunt, his father's sister, from the age of 6 to 13. And it was so far out of my experience and unexpected that I just thought, you got to get enough. I didn't say this, but I thought you got to get a different sponsor. I'm not prepared to do this, but I think God gave me the words to tell him finally that, that, because I wanted to go and kill the aunt, the guy was so victimized. But have you guys heard things where you felt totally unprepared to give guidance to a fifth step presenter?
Oh, I have, and I think the best thing to do when I am unprepared to give guidance is not to give guidance, and that's a new move for me, by the way. But but the other part of that, and Ralph talked about it a minute ago, there have been times when I have heard a piece of information that I wondered if it required action on my part. And that's tough. I have, as Ralph said, there is a couple of times when I have strongly encouraged someone to to deal with this in a outside of AA in an appropriate way. And if they weren't going to do that, I didn't feel like that if we were that misaligned, I didn't feel like I was probably the right person to continue as a sponsor for them. But it's tough. That's what I meant when sometimes we get a piece of information. You know, when my daughter was young and we told her, said, you can tell us anything. And then that night she told us something. I thought, ooh, I'd rather you hadn't told me that, you know. And so sometimes when we encourage that honesty, we have to take the responsibility that comes with that.
And I think that's one of the ones too, Doug, that over the years, I've fallen on the side of maybe, just maybe my role in that one was to be the ear so that the secret the power could be diminished from the secret, you know. And I think there is, you know, that aspect is minimized, the aspect of being the compassionate listener. There is a question in the chat, Ali, and somebody says, I would like to know whether you have had any negative experiences that damage your trust while reading a fifth step. If so, how did you find the willingness, trust to resubmit yourself to another fifth step? I have never had any damaging experiences that damaged my trust while doing a fifth. I have heard of people who have had trust violated. I have heard of people, and as a sponsor, when I answer a question, I put on two hats. One hat is if I'm the person entrusted with the responsibility. So if you entrust me with trust, then I don't violate that trust. That's a tremendous responsibility. But on the other end, if I'm the person that's trusting somebody and I'm the alcoholic whose very life depends on the maintenance of his spiritual condition, if I'm that alcoholic, there has never been anything I've encountered in Alcoholics Anonymous that has tailspin me out of this process, not me personally. Because I've been in places in life, sometimes when I get in the bathtub, you know, I wonder, you know, I think God is going to let me drown in the bathtub. And I look for things for people to do in the bathtub. And okay, it's some stuff, but I come from places where any breaches in our fellowship, I cannot imagine any of them coming close to what I would experience if I leave you guys. So I'm not minimizing the fact that somebody can have their trust breached. It has not happened to me, and I have not yet run into anything that anybody has done in these rooms that has caused me for 1 second to think of leaving these rooms.
You know, the line for years that Clancy used to use was the only thing wrong with AA is it seems to be populated almost exclusively by alcoholics. And which means that a guy like me is going to trip over himself from time to time. And while I think I've been pretty good in that area, it is not shocking to me that someone could knowingly or casually or unthinkingly betray a trust. Now, I've not had that happen relative to a fifth step that I have shared with someone. And I don't think I've ever betrayed that confidence with someone who shared a fifth step with me. But I will tell you, I have over the years a time or two carelessly shared outside of a meeting what was shared in a meeting. And I think the same level and commitment to anonymity it really applies. And so I do want to always hold myself accountable for that anonymity, that we encourage people that AA, not just with a sponsor, but that a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where you can be honest and trust that anonymity, that you will not be attached to that. And I, you know, after being around a long time, there were a couple of times where I didn't think something was as important as the person who shared it did. And I don't get to decide that for somebody else.
Thank you, Caden, for that question in the chat. Sammy, come on up, please.
Everyone, my name is Sammy. I am an alcoholic and an addict. Steve and Merle, thank you so much for your wisdom and enlightenment throughout all these weeks. You know, I have a sponsee who is about 25 years sober, and we're doing a fifth step. And my question would be, how long no matter what I do, no matter what angle I come from in our fourth column, I just cannot get them to see any truth on their part. They're defiant, they know it all. And I find myself banging my head up against the wall. At what point do I stop banging my head? Because no matter what I say, doesn't seem to give any help or wisdom or anything.
I think as soon as my head hurts. I think that if I am at the banging my head state, that I have now inserted myself into it. It doesn't mean you're not right. And I shouldn't speak to it. It doesn't mean I'm not right about my facts, but it does mean that self-will is now running the show. And that's going to put me, our book says, we talked about it a few weeks ago, that's going to put me in collision with the world and its people. And I've had to step back from treating sponsees like misbehaving teenagers who didn't get the lesson plan. We lay it out and we do our best. And I'm glad that I'm sure my sponsors over the years, maybe as early as last week, shook his head at me and is telling somebody, I just can't get Steve to see it, man. so I know it's out there.
So Sammy, if you're talking about in a resentment inventory, then apparently they're in a resentment inventory and they have a resentment. I usually have a couple of questions. How's that working for you? The first thing is, how's it working for you? If it's working for you, keep doing whatever it is. And then, do you want to be right or do you want to be free? And if you, whichever one of those, then I'm cool. You like it, I love it. You know, and the shortcut, Sandy got to a shortcut version. He used to say, if you're disturbed, if you want to get undisturbed, amends or forgive. And you got, but that process to get to those is I got to look in that fourth column. So, but like Steve said, when you're tired of bumping your head, you'll stop bumping your head.
Thank you, Sammy. Paula, come on up, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paola, and I'm an alcoholic. Ralph, I just want to say really quickly, I don't know if you ever heard this, but I drank alone all the time, and I knew I was an alcoholic, and I listened to you on YouTube, and it's so nice to finally see you. I was just listening and finally went into the rooms, and thank you. I do want to share that I did my fifth step with my priest, and I always felt like it was incomplete, like I wasn't being honest. And thank you for that. But I have a question. My story is sort of involves a lot of, sexual abuse, trafficking, things like that I never shared. And sometimes I feel like it's too much to put on my sponsor because I'm also codependent and I feel bad for them. Could you share some insight about sometimes it holds us back because we don't want to put that burden on other people? Thank you so much.
Steve, you can, but if I understand that, and that's another side of ego. Here's the deal. Sponsors, like sponsees, sometimes sponsors will get overly worried. Sponsors, believe it or not, we've heard it. We can take it. And in fact, you'll be sponsoring. Just imagine if you're sponsoring, can somebody say something that's going to shock or overburden you? That's who sponsors are. They're me. That's who we are. That's who we are. And I choose voluntarily. Nobody can do this for you. I voluntarily choose that I'm going to trust somebody. Now, my ego and my fear will make me say I'm protecting them. I'm looking out for them. Well, how's that working for you? How's that working for you? There's something that happens, Paula, and then I'm going to get us to Steve. Because you're right. what you say probably is something, you may have something I've never heard before. You may share something I've never experienced before. You may share something that's overwhelming to me. But I've been on this path with you guys for 34 years. I'm gonna share a secret with you. There's something that takes place when me and you come together that is bigger than me and you by ourselves. There's somebody else in the boat with us. Everybody on here who sponsors can tell you that. Everybody on here who sponsors can tell you that. There are words that come out of a sponsor's mouth that they didn't have before they were talking to you. And they don't know where it comes from. So when you enter into that pack, you know, don't worry about, can I overwhelm my sponsor? You probably can. But you cannot overwhelm this alchemy of me, you, and this presence that's going to come in there with us both. I'm not just talking. I know that sounds like ooh-wee, but trust that, Steve. Yeah.
Ralph, I had the exact same thought and experience in it, Paul. That when in this fifth step we say that we're going to share with ourselves, with God, and another human being. Those aren't three separate occasions. That is simultaneous. So that power. So we're not limited. We've got a power greater than that sponsor. We've invited God into this relationship, and while there may be anecdotal evidence that sometimes it's a challenge, globally this thing goes pretty well. And if I'm going to make a mistake in quotation marks, I would encourage the mistake to be to trust that process rather than think that I'm protecting somebody else. And I believe that, again, that this power enters into this and in a way that is truly magnificent and changes the process for us and blesses sponsorship and that fifth step experience.